You've taken the client ID for Google Analytics, you've stored it, and you passed it into the form, into the CRM, just like you did your other parameters. Once you have that, then you can build the attribution that closes the loop on this analytics. So let's just take a quick recap before we move forward. What have we done so far? Well, ads and Google Analytics always talk to each other. You probably know that. If people are coming to your website and you have GA, you can see, where they came from. If it's Google Ads, you can definitely see that. Now we have the ads parameters going into the CRM. We set that up first with all of the parameters in that big script. We also have the key piece of Google Analytics info going into the CRM. That's your client ID. Both of those things are converging into the CRM, into these new fields on every record that's created. What are we missing? We're missing the backwards flow of that same data. It's all well and good, and you can do some manual analysis with what's in the CRM at this point, but we want to automate it. We want to send it backwards so that we can look in the platform itself and start seeing all the things that someone did, all the times they came to the site before they filled out the form. And that's what's really cool, is the backfilling of that information. That's why we capture the client ID. So take this example. This is a dummy record out of HubSpot. If we've captured all these things, just like we have here, what can we now see? We can see this person became a customer. Awesome. The campaign, the source and the medium that they used to get there on the day they filled out the form. But we can also see their Google Analytics client ID. Because of that, we can find that client ID in Google Analytics. And when you do that, go in here again sometime, click one of those and see what it shows you. What it will show you is for that client ID, not just the visit information for when they filled out the form, but every time they'd been to the website and where they came from and what they did every time before it, because the client ID never changes. If I go to statwax.com from this computer 50 times over the next 2 years, it's all going to roll up as a story under the same client ID. Because we know that customer's client ID, we can find it and look at that customer's entire story of interactions with our business before becoming a customer and see what had value along the way. So now not only do we have campaign, source, and medium, but boom, we have the ability to build the entire journey of those touch points. There's one very simple way to do this and one slightly more difficult. The simple way is a bit of a product plug. We get no money from this because we just pay them to use it, just as many other companies do. If you're not familiar with Zapier, it's a great time to get familiar. There's a free version. There's very cheap paid versions. If you've collected everything that we've built so far, Zapier is a very quick and easy way to do the rest of it nearly automatically. What it does is it allows you, without web development, to match up two different services and send information. So in this case, we could do things like every time a prospect changes milestones or stages in HubSpot, we go ahead and fire back to Google Analytics that happened under their client ID so that we can start seeing those things. Or send a new conversion to Google Ads when a goal becomes a customer, things like that. If you don't want to do that, there's a slightly more difficult way, and please don't tune out here because you see a bunch of colors that mean nothing and a really weird URL. It's actually not as difficult as it looks, but there is some steps and tutorial to it. Google Analytics has something called a measurement protocol. It's basically like an API call, where if you go to this URL and fill out certain information, it will create an event in that analytics account on that client ID, and it will label the event whatever you decide to call it. So why do people use this? Let's say we want to see every person who goes from a lead to a demo. That's what this URL does right here. What would happen is we would fire this every time that happened with that person's client ID that we've captured into Google Analytics. And it would create an event that says a demo was set from this person. So you could then start filtering, show me everything that generated demos, everything that generated customers. And it's going to pull all of that together and start to show you all of the touch points they had. So now you don't have to manually go and match up client IDs one at a time to see what happened. It's going to start showing them in the Google Analytics events, and you can set up goals and you can optimize toward it. Problem is, you don't want to do this one at a time every single time. That is why Google has built a way to do it in batches. So you can actually manually build what that URL looks like with where your client ID is coming from, what you want to call the events, what your analytics ID is, all of that, and script it into your CRM so that every night it takes any prospects that have changed milestones or done whatever you want them to do. And if they have a client ID, it fires it back in a big batch every night to Google Analytics so that every morning when you wake up and go in there are new events and new pieces of data to show you, oh, this channel created another demo today, and this keyword led to 2 more customers, and so on and so forth. You can do that, and you can script it out of the CRM. That's a little difficult. You need a CRM admin. You need someone who knows some web dev. I show you this just in case you want to get adventurous. Or I strongly encourage you, when I send this deck out to everyone and we post it on our website, click this link here. This is not us, but I will give props to anyone who is not StatWax when they've earned it, and these folks have certainly earned it. This link will take you to a tutorial of how to set up the same thing for free in Google Apps and Google Sheets. Google Apps basically lets you do small snippets of code that run some type of automation. This tutorial will let you take everything we've just set up in your CRM and automate it so every day it sends the pertinent information back into Google Analytics and matches up CRM post-lead milestones with Google Analytics pre-lead digital journeys. That is when you can start building the attribution. Because now, picture you have every piece of CRM information, all these actions that can occur, good lead, bad lead, customer, demo, trial, sign up, etc. The possibilities are endless. You now have them all in Google Analytics as events. And every time one of those events is created, every time a prospect changes status in your CRM, it fires another event. Excuse me. And Google Analytics looks back and says, here are all the things they did before. So I'm going to show you all of this stuff in Google Analytics. Now you can also turn it into goals. Just like you would have a goal of tracking who signed up for a webinar, you can have a goal of who became a closed customer and who set a demo. And when you have goals, you can import them into your platforms like Google Ads. So if you're running paid search, you can start seeing down to a micro level what keywords are most responsible for leads, for demos, which ones are driving more disqualified leads and why. Right now, you might have a keyword that drives 100 leads a month at $100 a piece, and you think, wow, that's awesome. That's the best cost per lead and the highest lead volume of any of my keywords. I'm dumping more money into that. What if all of a sudden you could start to see that 90 of those leads end up disqualified? But another keyword that drives 50 a month at twice the cost, all 50 of them book demos. What's the keyword you're going to choose now? These type of post-lead milestones and downstream impacts are what help you make the best business decisions with your marketing dollars and better evaluate your keywords, your channels, your ad variations and creative, your email newsletters and the articles that you post, so on and so forth. But you can't do it until you're tracking those things in the CRM and then matching it back to Google Analytics so that you can truly see not just what the last touch point was, but all of the ones that came before. So now all of a sudden, what if one keyword looked like it was never generating leads because people clicked it but never filled out a form? But all of a sudden, you start building out the journey and you realize, oh, wow, that keyword, 5 days later, everyone who clicked it ended up coming back from another channel and then converting and then became a customer. All of a sudden, that keyword has early journey impact that you never saw before. That is what we're building here by matching the offline sales systems back to the online tracking systems. Then you can start building out reporting. You can look at things like which channel is driving what customer life cycles. All of a sudden here, Instagram looks like it's pretty good. Third most leads total, but not really turning into customers, at least not for a while. Oh, but maybe it just takes a really long time. How long in days until a lead becomes the next milestone and the next? What channels are more efficient? All of this is visible because you can then pull this CRM data and down to a channel or an ad level start saying, how many days until they move from one stage to the next? What percentage are dropping out disqualified? Who's not getting in touch with us? What's more efficient, et cetera, et cetera. The possibilities on how to measure business impact down to a channel level are pretty much endless, because you're going to find shallower touch points that you previously thought were not converting that are actually ending up quite valuable. You're going to see what truly played a role in the customers, not just driving prospects, but what created customers and what did you think was doing well that actually wasn't. And you're going to be able to get a true return on investment for your channel. That display tactic that was never generating immediate conversions, but suddenly you see actually has a role in every customer. Suddenly that spend has a lot more ROI on it than you once thought. Same thing for individual keywords or creatives that you use. So really, all of this was done because you first took your marketing touch points and ensured that on your website, an eventual lead was able to populate with those tracking parameters so your CRM could see where they came from. Then taking that CRM information, and because of that one single client ID, matching it back to everything that person had done on your website for the totality of time previously. That's what closed loop analytics is. That is essentially what it means to close the gap between marketing and sales, between digital platforms and CRM, between website, GA, and CRM. Closing the loop by matching the data back and sending it both directions so that you can uncover all of this customer journey and all of these better data points to help you make decisions. So first off, I thank you very much for joining us today, for listening, paying attention, hopefully taking some good notes, hopefully getting some good ideas of things you can implement that maybe aren't in place yet. We have about 10 minutes left for questions. I've got a couple that I can go through that have been sent during the webinar here. One individual asks, and this touches on a little bit about what we mentioned before, how does the script and these cookies work with things like GDPR and script blocking plugins? Very good question. And the short answer is it doesn't, which is why I said I would come back to those other ways of doing things. And this is a little bit something for another blog post or another webinar in the future, now that we've at least discussed the basics. But in short, what we discussed today works because you're creating cookies that store values so that you can grab them later. If someone on GDPR says, I don't want to create cookies with you, that script doesn't run. If someone has a cookie blocker on, those cookies aren't created. There's nothing to grab and put in those hidden form fields. You'll get blanks and you'll be right back where you started. This is increasingly becoming a bigger issue because we are moving to a cookieless world. We have to find other ways to track. I chose this method today because it's one that we've used for a while, and right now it still works very well in most instances. But yes, it does have its hangups. The Google Tag Manager data layer is a solution to this. So I encourage you to do some searching on that and read into it a little bit if you're interested. Because what it can do is with some script modifications, it can do the same thing. But when it pulls the variables, instead of storing them in a cookie, it stores them in what's called the data layer. It's basically this like behind the scenes basket to hold information that Google Tag Manager created and operates off of. So instead of storing things in a cookie, you can store it there and then use a script to call that information later. Same deal, but you're swapping data layer in for cookies. That's a direction we're starting to head with our clients as well. We haven't had to yet. And to be quite honest with you, the script and the process for creating the cookies as sort of a beginner starting point was far easier to walk through on a webinar, which is why we chose that direction. But yes, excellent question about how to address a non-cookie scenario. And then someone else asked about how to modify the script for different input types. Again, it's a little difficult sometimes in a webinar to give the full tutorial. Google CSS Selector, and you'll find tutorials and instructions on how to figure out what that input field's nomenclature is. Basically, what the code type is. Is it HubSpot.hs-input? That piece of code is called CSS Selector, and that's what you have to figure out. What is the selector for your particular form field? If it's just a normal hard-coded form field, it's just that input equals, and there's specific brackets and all. If it's gravity forms, I believe it's name equals and then input, like it flips it. So every form type has a slightly different CSS selector. Excuse me. But that is essentially how it works. And that is how you would figure out which one you need to use. So I hope that helps some. And chances are within your CRM, if you or someone at your company is making those new form fields, they probably know where to find like the HTML naming conventions form. It's usually documented with the CRM. So again, thank you everyone for joining today. I hope this was helpful. If there are questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. We are going to send the deck out to everyone. We're going to post this on our website as well. And I hope this unlocks a wide range of new analysis opportunities and tracking and data opportunities to help make your marketing more efficient and just elevate everything you're doing at your business. So thank you all. Have a wonderful day.